are you? We're going to continue reading The Phantom Tollbooth, and we're going to just get right into it. We will backtrack a little bit. As they drove along, Talk continued to explain the importance of time, quoting the old philosophers and poets and illustrating each point with great gestures that brought him previously close to tumbling headlong from the speeding automobile. Before long, they saw in the distance the towers and flags of Dictionopolis sparkling in the sunshine. And in a few moments they reached the Great Wall and stood at the gateway to the city. "Ahem," roared the gateman, clearing his throat and snapping smartly to attention. "This is Dictionopolis, a happy kingdom adventurously located in the foothills of confusion and caressed by the gentle breeze from the sea of knowledge. Today, by royal proclamation, is market day. Have you come to buy or sell?" "I beg your pardon," said Milo. "Buy or sell," repeated the gateman impatiently. "Which is it? You must have come here for some reason." "Well, began Milo. "Come now, if you don't have a reason, you must at least have an explanation, or certainly an excuse," interrupted the gateman. Milo shook his head. Very serious," the gateman said, shaking his head also. "You can't get in without a reason." He thought for a moment and then continued, "Wait a minute. Maybe I have an old one you can use." He took a battered suitcase from the gatehouse and began rummaging busily through it, mumbling to himself, No, this won't do. No. This is fine. This is fine," he cried triumphantly, holding up a small medallion on a chain. He dusted it off, and engraved on one side were the words, "Why not?" That's a good reason for almost anything. A bit used, perhaps, but still quite serviceable. And with that, he placed it around Milo's neck, pushed back the heavy iron gate, bowed low, and motioned them into the city. "I wonder what the market will be like," thought Milo, as they drove through the gate. But before there was time for an answer, they had driven into an immense square, crowded with long lines of stalls, heaped with merchandise and decorated in gay-colored banting. Overhead, a large banner proclaimed, "Welcome to the Word Market." And from across the square, 5 very tall, thin gentlemen, regally dressed in silks and satins, plumed hats and buckled shoes, rushed up to the car, stopped short, mopped 5 brows, caught 5 breaths, unrolled 5 parchments, and began talking in turn. Greetings, salutations, welcome, good afternoon, hello. Milo nodded his head, and they went on reading from their scrolls. By order of Azaz the Unabridged, King of Dictionopolis, monarch of letters, emperor of phrases, sentences, and miscellaneous figures of speech, we offer you the hospitality of our kingdom, country, nation, state, commonwealth, realm, empire, palatinate, principality. Do all those words mean the same thing? Gasped Milo. Of course, certainly, precisely, exactly, yes, they replied in order. Well then, said Milo, not understanding why each one said the same thing in a slightly different way. Wouldn't it be simpler to just use one? It would certainly make more sense. Nonsense. Ridiculous. Fantastic. Absurd. Bosh. They chorused again and continued. We're not interested in making sense. It's not our job, scolded the first. Besides, explained the second, one word is as good as another, so why not use them all? Then you don't have to choose which one is right, advised the third. Besides, sighed the fourth, if one is right, then 10 or 10 times is right. Obviously, you don't know who we are, sneered the fifth, and they presented themselves one by one. The Duke of Definition, the Minister of Meaning, the Earl of Essence, the Count of Connotation, and the Undersecretary of Understanding. Milo acknowledged the introduction, and as talk growled softly, the minister explained. We are the king's advisors, or, in more formal terms, his cabinet. Cabinet, recited the Duke, a small private room or closet case with drawers, etc., for keeping valuables or displaying curiosities. 2. Council room for chief ministers of state. 3. A body of official advisors to the chief executive of a nation. You see, continued the minister, bowing thankfully to the Duke, Dictionopolis is the place where all the words in the world come from. They're grown right here in our very orchards. I didn't know that words grew on trees, said Milo timidly. Where did you think they grew? Shouted the Earl irritably. A small crowd began to gather to see the little boy who didn't know that letters grew on trees. I didn't know they grew at all, admitted Milo, even more timidly. Several people shook their heads sadly. Well, money doesn't grow on trees, does it? Demanded the Count. I've heard not, said Milo. Then something must. Why not words? Exclaimed the Undersecretary triumphantly. The crowd cheered his display of logic and continued about its business. To continue, continued the minister impatiently, once a week, by royal proclamation, the word market is held here in the great square, and people come from everywhere to buy the words they need or trade in the words they haven't used. Our job, said the Count, is to see that all the words sold are proper ones. for it wouldn't do to sell someone a word that had no meaning or didn't exist at all. For instance, if you bought a word like gehilps, where would you use it? It would be difficult, thought Milo. But there were so many words that were difficult, and he knew hardly any of them. But we never choose which ones to use, explained the Earl as they walked towards the market stalls. For as long as they mean what they mean to mean, we don't care if they make sense or nonsense. Innocence or magnificence, added the Count. Reticence or common sense, said the Undersecretary. That seems simple enough, said Milo, trying to be polite. Easy as falling off a log, cried the Earl, falling off a log with a loud thump. Must you be so clumsy? Shouted the Duke. All I said was, began the Earl, rubbing his head. We heard you, said the minister angrily, and you'll have to find an expression that's less dangerous. The Earl dusted himself off as the others snickered audibly. You see, continued the Count, you must pick your words very carefully and be sure to say just what you intend to say. And now we must leave to make preparations for the royal banquet. You'll be there, of course, said the minister. But before Milo had a chance to say anything, they were rushing off across the square as fast as they could, as fast as they had come. Enjoy yourself in the market, shouted back the Undersecretary. Market, recited the Duke, an open space or covered building in which, and that was the last Milo heard as they disappeared into the crowd. I never knew words could be so confusing, said Milo, to Talk, as he bent down to scratch the dog's ear. Only when you use a lot to say a little, answered Talk. And Milo thought this was quite the wisest thing he'd heard all day. Come, he shouted. Let's see the market. It looks very exciting.